Today on the show is Elena Stefanopol. She is a talent leader known for building high-impact hiring systems inside fast-growing tech companies. She currently leads talent at Rundoo, where she connects talent acquisition, leadership development, and people systems to help scale high-performing teams.
When you hear hiring manager, that manager portion is actually very deceiving because it implies that they're managing the whole hiring process and hence the recruiter, which is not true.
What are you seeing right now in terms of the labor market for both technical and go-to-market hiring?
I would say trust in your expertise and experience and what you bring to the table, because it is very important. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.
Hey, RecOps friends, are you still losing hours every week to interview scheduling chaos? What if you could eliminate the back and forth, cut scheduling time by 90%, and actually get those recruiter hours back on the hiring desk where they belong? That's exactly why teams are turning to Rooster, the native interview scheduling platform built inside Workday Recruiting that finally makes interview logistics fast, seamless, and predictable. With Rooster, you connect directly to your Workday system. No extra tools, no disconnected workflows, and instantly let candidates self-schedule with one-click booking links. It handles time zone and language differences automatically, sends branded confirmations and reminders via SMS, email, or WhatsApp, and keeps interviewers, coordinators, and candidates in sync without constant manual follow-ups. And it's not just about speed. Rooster helps you see the true cost of scheduling inefficiencies with its TAS metric, so ops teams can track and improve the parts of the process that slow you down the most. Whether your team hires locally, globally, or somewhere in between, Rooster cuts errors, saves 10 plus recruiter hours per week, and creates a candidate experience that reflects the quality of your brand. If you're ready to stop chasing calendars and start hiring with confidence, visit rooster.us and schedule a demo today. Your recruiters will thank you. Now, on with the show. All right, what's up, everybody? Today on the show is Elena Stefanopol. She is a talent leader known for building high-impact hiring systems inside fast-growing tech companies. She currently leads talent at Rundoo, where she connects talent acquisition, leadership development, and people systems to help scale high-performing teams. She's also a 3-time Talent 100 Global TA leader and previously helped build talent at Airbnb. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
How's your day going? Where are you based? What are you working on?
Pretty good. It's very sunny. I'm in the office in Redwood City and just had a very nice lunch and a walk after lunch. So I'm feeling pretty happy. I'm excited to talk to you.
That's great. Yeah, me too. We met online, which is how I have met a lot of my guests on the show. This whole thing started because I was gifted a podcast microphone and a white elephant Christmas gift years ago. And I thought, hey, now that I've got some time on my hands between hyper-growth tech startups, let's have some conversation with recruiting leaders. And I'm excited about this conversation with you because you've got a wonderful perspective. We actually met in a comment thread where we had like a differing opinion, and I can't remember what it was, but it was just like, yes, finally, somebody who wants to talk shop instead of the typical things on LinkedIn. So what has you excited to be in recruiting these days?
I am at a stage right now where I'm excited to help shape the talent function at a maybe more broader level. I've been doing that in all of the companies that I've joined, and I've joined pretty early on as a founding recruiter, founding head of talent. But I really want to share some of the best practices, and I really want to help people going through the same role and experience to not have to reinvent the wheel. So that's really what gets me excited right now. So that kind of puts it in a different perspective of thinking like, okay, how can we turn this into more of a blueprint rather than throwing a recruiter in there and hoping they do their best and make it work? Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation and just generally to share more about my experience, and hopefully that helps people get a head start in these interesting founding roles.
The whole point of building the talent machine, our mission is to uplift and upskill the recruiting industry. And there's so many folks that have the job title recruiter or talent acquisition partner or TA manager, recruiting director, you name it. But at the end of the day, recruiting is about getting to a handshake yes between a company and a candidate. I love the in-house dynamic. I love the outside perspective when I'm working with clients as an outside agency. There's just so many ways to get to a great outcome. What do you think recruiters need to focus on today, whether they're working in-house or externally, to make a strong impact?
Say it's probably the partnership with the hiring managers. And that's really what I've identified over my experience to be the most impactful one, because it's at the foundation of everything that follows, right? Like your calibration if it happens, or the type of candidates that you actually bring on board. You're selling the company, the role, but also the hiring manager and, who they would be working on with. And then everything that your relationship is basically the foundation for the whole search, and it's going to set the tone for how that is going to go. So I would say to have the biggest impact and be the most effective you can be is to invest in that relationship with hiring managers. And by that, I don't mean being a yes person all the time. Honestly, quite the contrary, educating the hiring manager and really giving them a view into your world as the recruiter to say, hey, this is everything that goes into me finding a candidate and getting them interested in our role, or this is everything that goes into us setting an interview, or these are the trade-offs between just going and finding people without having a kickoff and like actually having a plan going into this search, and then bringing them into those conversations and partnering on the search. I think we're past that time, I would hope, where it's a very top down, go get me candidates and we'll take it from there type of relationship between hiring manager and recruiter. So I'm a big fan of and an advocate for having a partnership, equal partnership when it goes into hiring.
Yeah, I think part of the problem might have been this idea that was perpetuated through when you and I came up in the industry. It was messaging I heard from TA leaders, and it was giving white glove service to our hiring managers. And when I think about that white glove service, it really just means that we're kind of acquiescing to hiring managers. And in my experience, what I've observed is one of the ways talent acquisition wastes a ton of operating expense is like a first-time hiring manager working with a earlier career recruiter. And that hiring manager wants to see 20, 25 candidates. And all of those screens are 30 to 45 minutes with the recruiter and then another 30 to 45 minutes with the hiring manager to get nowhere. So I love that you called out alignment. Am I off the mark here, or is that something you've seen too?
No, for sure. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of talking about it and positioning it as a partnership in any company that I've been at. On that note, though, I found a very interesting dynamic, even with the titles or the roles in this hiring relationship. If you think about it, when you hear hiring manager, that manager portion is actually very deceiving because it implies that they're managing the whole hiring process and hence the recruiter, which is not true. What you're actually managing is the future hire, right? So, of course, so you're invested in finding the best person for your team, right? And you're responsible for making that decision, the hiring decision, but you're not managing the recruiter. They're a partner that you need to work with actually very well so that you get the best outcome. So I think even that dynamic really plays an interesting role in this whole kind of who does what in the hiring process, and or should we have a seat at the table? Should we be partners? Should we not? So it's very ingrained, actually.
I love that perspective, Elena. That's actually really interesting because if you think about it, if it's a first time hiring manager, first time people manager, maybe they just got promoted from an IC, but the recruiter they're working with is an IC. There is this subconscious bias we have that if somebody has a manager title, they are like an arbiter of process or they have more power in the internal politics.
Yeah, it's a power dynamic, absolutely. And it shouldn't be because you should, yeah, I think we need to address that as an industry, honestly. It shouldn't be a hiring manager. We need to find another name.
I love it. Give me a few more sips of this tea and we can spill it because I got some strong opinions around hiring manager relationships and dynamics. It's actually something I've heard a lot of from more senior recruiters lately is that hiring managers can be very challenging to work with. We are actually working in one of the largest generationally diverse workforces we've seen, where now we have Gen Z that are stepping into people management roles. We have Gen Z founders that are running companies, and we all have different value systems, even within those generational demographics. So I think at the end of the day, it's really, can you read a room? Can you influence without authority? And can you deliver outcomes? The outcomes we get to deliver as recruiters is precision at the top of the funnel. And it all goes back to that intake. So let's go there. If you're building a hiring function, how do you run a great intake meeting with the kickoff so that you have alignment to what they're looking for?
I actually have started to go even before the kickoff, especially coming in. I run a team design exercise, and that's basically, it's like a pared down org design. It's the same principle of mapping out what you already have in the team, what do you want to build and what the gap is. And not necessarily from, it doesn't have to be too granular. It doesn't have to be like a whole HR lift. It's just a very much an exercise of even me getting to know the team. And that gives me context into what their priorities are, what's holding them back. I can understand like even how to prioritize if they have multiple roles open, how I can help them prioritize those roles. And like we can focus first on one or the other because of X and Y reason. So it's like a precursor to the kickoff meeting, this team design exercise where we map out the team. And I found that to be very helpful and very eye-opening because everyone is busy, and especially hiring managers, they have it's an interesting role, I think, where you get pressure on yourself from like all sides, from leadership to deliver and to hire, from your team to hire because they're feeling the burden of not having enough capacity and so on. And also, I think it's just that type of role that it's expected to know everything about hiring, even though they're a first-time hiring manager or a first-time manager, to your point earlier. So it's a lot of pressure to deliver very quickly. And I do have that empathy for hiring managers. But I think this is where that partnership with the recruiter should start, is even before we have a need to hire. But obviously, we're all thrown into it anyway. Like even carving out like 15 minutes, right? That can have a huge difference in how that partnership is set and how the search is going to go. Because the recruiter gets that context that most often they actually just don't get. And it's such a detriment to pretty much everything that they need to do and to the business at the end of the day. So having that context is crucial, I think. And I would recommend everyone to just run that very quick exercise when it comes down to actually opening a role and we're sure like, okay, this is what we need to hire. Then the kickoff meeting, I would say, is pretty straightforward. I don't think I've reinvented the kickoff meeting, but having that context and then going through like what is this role going to own? What is the impact? If we're not hiring this person, what is the work that is going to not get done at the business level? So that we can actually express that to the candidate and turn it into a selling point. What kind of autonomy is this person going to have? How are they expected to operate? And then you can go obviously into the skill sets and everything. But honestly, I think that's the biggest differentiator. If you do understand that business context, on top of course, the profile, I think that's really going to set you apart as a recruiter.
So you've built some great hiring machines. And when I think about what it takes to build excellence, what do you think is the difference between early stage startup hiring versus scale up stage? Or what do you have to get right when it's hiring the first 50 people versus the first 500?
Yeah, I would say honestly, for the first 30, even 50 people, it's pretty much founder led. I don't think it's a surprise for anyone, but it's very much referral, founder led, tapping into your network and the immediate team's network. So it's pretty organic. At 50 is where it starts to break if you don't bring in some sort of structure. I think the art in that is figuring out how much structure to bring. So it's not overly produced, but it's still helping you hire faster in a more predictable way, making sure you're hitting the right skill set. It's not, you're moving from more of a generalist skill set across the board to more specialized maybe. So there's different nuances that you need to start being aware of when bringing people in. But purely from a startup versus scale up, at a scale up, you truly need to have all your ducks in a row when it comes to the process. I'm a big believer in that because knowing from the get-go, hey, this is the stage. These are the stages that we need to go through. This is what your responsibility is. This is what mine is. And this is where we come together. Having that clarity across all stakeholder actually enables you to move so much quicker than having no process or a very let's go with the flow type of process where you basically create chaos at every stage. And you have to gain alignment and you have to get a meeting on the calendar and it gets delayed and like you lose a candidate and it just is not scalable. So I would say that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I think ultimately when it comes to what hiring managers, whether they're founders or VP of sales, VP of engineering at an early stage company, what they really want is just the next person on their calendar to be the person they want to hire. And it doesn't really matter how we get there as recruiters, whether it's referrals, inbound, probably cold outbound, let's just be honest, after we've tapped referrals for early stage companies. Yeah. What are you seeing as what founders want to see when you step in your first couple of months?
When it comes to the candidate side, of course, it's that kind of building the trust so they can hand over the keys to the castle, right? And they trust you to build, to understand, hey, this is what makes our company great. And this is how we're going to continue to build on this. Obviously, I think depending on how early you join, you do have a say in that, which is really cool to help shape. But I would say quality is definitely first, alignment with the existing culture, because at that stage it can really make or break the company, I believe. You need to be aware of that and take that into account. And then, of course, is the speed of execution. We're always talking about like quality and speed. Startups move extremely fast, and you need to be able to match that. I would say do that in a way that is not necessarily the most chaotic. So bringing in whenever you have a little bit of downtime, take advantage of that and try to understand the business a little bit more. Or you're hearing in the all hands the go-to-market presentation, like they've fallen behind on their close rate. Why did that happen? Go talk to the sales leader and see what's going on. So it's really just being embedded. I think recruiting and talent has such a unique role in the company, and it should be embedded across the board, not only be tapped when we need to hire, basically, or we have a performance issue. So as long as we give it that space to exist in the company, I think that's where it can be the most effective. But coming back to the founders, that trust is really important. And I totally get that. It's their baby that they've built, and you need to take care of it and grow it in a way that we're all going to be proud of it at the end of the day, basically.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the pride of recruiting comes with being accountable. Can we open a rec and build a pipeline in 2 weeks and ship 10 great candidates and have, a backup candidate? It really comes down to knowing your numbers and being able to reverse engineer your pipelines based on what you think is right for that industry or type of company. You can look at a lot of benchmarks in the industry, but I'll be honest, in early stage companies, you've got to beat them. You've got to have smoke in reply and interest rates. You've got to have really strong pass-through rates. You don't want to be wasting anybody's time. How do you balance that speed with quality?
Yeah, that's always the question, isn't it? If you throw cost in there, we have all the elements that we need to think about. It really is a calibration, I think. I just started, for example, at Rundoo. This is my second week. So I'm still calibrating at how fast we say we need to move versus how fast we actually move. That's also one thing, but also on the profile of person that would be successful here. So again, I will always take it back to that context. Once you have that, then I agree, obviously, all of the funnel and the metrics and your numbers need to make sense, and they need to track towards a hire as soon as possible. But I think it's important to understand, even looking at the interview process with fresh eyes, and say, hey, why are we even doing this interview? Does it show us anything? I understand you've done it so far, but is this still needed? Or is it just inertia, which is totally fine. But we need to make sure that we're tightening everything we can so that we do get eventually to that streamlined process that enables us to scale really quickly, as well as keeping that quality of hire high. So it's a science, but also, like I said earlier, it's a little bit of an art to match the pace with the company and see like how fast you need to move on certain things.
You said something interesting that we talk a lot about, quality of hire. When you say quality of hire, are you referencing like a metric, or are you saying like quality of hire, like just the phrase of words in a sentence, like the quality of somebody's hire where they had presumably a good outcome? Or do you have a specific equation?
I did in previous companies, we did have a quality of hire metric. It's funny because it's been such a hot topic for such a long time, and everyone kind of measures it differently, and it becomes some sort of a debate as to what's the best way to measure it. And I think my stance on it is whatever makes sense for the company. It's similar to pretty much any other framework or metric or whatever you want to do or implement. You still need to take it through the filter of the company and adjust it to your environment. Otherwise, it's not going to stick, it's not going to click, it's not going to make any sense. So what I've done in the past is my recruiters would have regular check-ins with their new hires. So 30 days in, 90 days in, and 6 months in with their new hires. And I would have the same cadence of check-ins with their hiring manager. So we would get both sides of the picture. We would ask fairly similar questions as to the performance, but it was really interesting, and it was really important to me to get the both points of views, because sometimes managers have a very limited view on their teams because they're busy and they're pulled in so many different directions. And I wanted to make sure that we get to hear the new hire out as well in terms of what their experience is. And pulling those together, we had a kind of a spreadsheet, of course. And at the end, we came up with a number, but I wanted to make sure it's not just numbers, it's also that qualitative data that we actually told us quite a bit. And we learned a lot about our onboarding process, even about our recruiting process, like setting the right expectations. So we treated those moments as feedback points, and we made sure to take that back and adjust and continuously adjust what we did and how we hired.
Yeah, I love that. I love that recruiters are not afraid to be accountable. And that is why we talk about quality of hire, is because we are able to build a pipeline from scratch. We're not afraid to cold call. We can work with challenging hiring managers. We can close candidates. We can run negotiations, things that you prime your nervous system and your physiology to do. It is a grind and a hustle to call 100 software engineers to get 10 onto your calendar. When I think about quality of hire, I like to go a little bit upstream, and I think about it in a few different ways. Is it a philosophy, like, say, DevOps? Is it an operational tool, like Scrum, Agile? Or is it a metric, like Net Promoter Score? And if it's a metric like Net Promoter Score, then inherently somebody has to be accountable, and therefore quality of hire cannot be a shared metric. So if no one is accountable to it, by default, it has to be either a philosophy or an operations tool. Enter just a phrase. We're going to think about quality of hire as the balance of the qualitative and quantitative experience of an employee, and therefore recruiters can't be accountable to it. But yet we say quality of hire because it has the word hire in it, and therefore who does the hiring? Recruiters. So I'm down for quality of hire to be a metric like Net Promoter Score. I will be 100% accountable to the people I hire if I get to make the decision on who's hiring them. And two, do I get to manage them?
Yeah. And this is why I don't think it should be a recruiter. Who makes the hiring decision is the hiring manager. We're coming back to words, right? And what they mean and the impact that they have on dynamics. Literally. Yes, we made the hire. We marked the candidate as hired in the ATS, but we did not make that ultimate decision. That was the hiring manager, and they are ultimately responsible for the people that they decide to bring on their teams, for how they manage, how well they onboard those new hires, how well they manage them further, and how they promote them and so on, retain them, right? That's part of the people management aspect. So that's just my spicy take. It should be a metric, and the hiring manager should be responsible for it. We're there as a recruiting partner to bring the structure, bring the candidates, bring everything they need to make the best decision for their team. If that's not happening, that's a different story. That's a different conversation to be had. But ideally, that's what the recruiting part brings. But ultimately, the manager makes the decision. As they like to think of managers being responsible for their own teams. So you look at, how well a manager does if, for example, their team does well, right? They deliver on time, they promote their people, they retain their people. On the flip side, if you have a manager who is not able to hire or retain anybody, you need to look into that, right? You're not just going to say it is what it is, right? It's just not how it works.
And the other thing that I have, and then we'll put a pin in quality of hire, is when quality of hire lacks a universal definition, we actually are creating confusion for our hiring managers. Because if you're in recruiting or HR and you're the CHR and you're talking about quality of hire with a hiring manager, and the hiring manager's, okay, cool, yeah, I came from this other company and we talked about quality of hire too. And then the CHRO is, oh, whoa, we actually don't define it like that. We define it this way. What other business group has a choose your own definition top line metric? Like, you wouldn't argue about net retention.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's a little, let's call it a little more fuzzy. But at the same time, you can bring just everything from outside, be it your former company or whatever, and just, put it in your current company and expect it to be the same. Because it's not. It's a different company. Of course, things are going to be different. You're not, even the way you hold meetings or promote, or, there's just different philosophies and different approaches that are pretty personal to that company. So I would even include the recruiting practice in this, and I'm sure we've all had those hiring managers who said, I've been hiring for 20 years. This is how I've done it in the past. My response to that is, great. Welcome to this company. This is how we do it here. Obviously, we're open to improving it. And we need to adapt to like our current environment, which is this company. So let's work together. I've done it for so many years and whatever. Here, you haven't done it because you just joined. So let's figure it out together.
I love it. And I love that you even said philosophy, because it's like if it's something as comparable as meeting rituals, that's operations. And if it is philosophy of how we do things here and being flexible around how we think about stuff, that's just to its core philosophical. But I love this idea of it being a metric. And if it is a metric, I want all the folks at the conferences, the whole industry to like put a definition to it. Give us an equation. We're going to earn that seat at the table that the CHRO wants so badly. Put the recruiters in the game. We're ready to go. We're not afraid to cold call somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about other metrics. What are your go-to metrics that you tell your business leaders to signal that hiring is working?
I would say even the speed of hiring, I found that sometimes can be a very interesting one to bring up, because what happens most of the time is everyone says hiring is so urgent and it's a high priority. And then you look into your ATS and you see someone sitting there for 5 days in a stage, and you're like, what happened here? If it's urgent, we should prioritize it. These are signal or like flags that I'm going to look at coming into it and say, okay, these are the ones that we need to address. First, I need to understand, like, is it really urgent, or are you just saying it's urgent? Because totally fair, maybe priority shifted. But we need to make sure that recruiting is in the loop on that and they can adjust. And they're not prioritizing a role that is actually not a priority for the business anymore. But yeah, that time to hire really can, or like time and stage, however granular you want to go. But I think it's more of a signal of, hey, we're actually moving at the pace that we should be, and it's in line with our business priorities or not. And if not, like, what's happening there? Do we need to adjust, or we just have to address some issues? Yeah, that's one of the more obvious ones. Of course, we can look at top of funnel, and that's more on the sourcing side of things and the typical conversion rates and everything. That's what I kind of love and also hate about recruiting. I don't think there's anything that we don't necessarily know about it, but like what we do with that information is where it could be a big differentiator. Like, we all can look at conversion rates, but what actual insight do we draw from them? And same with the time to hire or time to fill, or we can go into the definition or whatever. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is, what do you do with those and how do you influence the business? How do you actually deliver on your goals? So really translating that from just metrics and dashboards, where it's really easy to just get lost, to be honest, especially if you're a data-driven recruiter. You can spend days on end in that dashboard and throw metrics at me. But what are we doing with them? Like, where are we going with them?
Yeah, it's so true. I think the context around data matters so much. Like, any good recruiter can reverse engineer like an estimate on what a pipeline will look like from close to top of funnel and get you within a standard acceptable deviation. I don't think there's going to be any surprises. Like, we can tell that story with charts and data, but like any good recruiter kind of knows what it'll likely be anyway. And the best recruiters just blow it out of the water with incredible top of funnel precision. When I think about something you mentioned, the time in stage, that's such a strong signal because it can be operationalized into a service level agreement. And SLA is such a great way for recruiters to be accountable to the business, because you can say, yep, it is time stamped. We are going to have a policy where folks stay in stage for maximum 48 hours. And like, you either did it or you didn't as a recruiter. So I love recruiters being more accountable by leaning into the metrics and the process around speed. That is like our greatest asset. You mentioned the triangle of speed, quality, cost. We can't always influence cost. Our teams, our founders, our compensation groups put together packages. The market determines the valuation of the companies to have some sort of forecast around equity. So, we really can't do much around cost, but we can really impact quality and time through speed and that top of funnel precision.
Yeah. I will also add too, it is a great accountability tool for recruiters, but also for hiring managers and interviewers. That time and stage, the further down you go down the funnel, is not even on the recruiter anymore. So those SLAs need to be applied to interviewers as well. Like, getting feedback. How much time do recruiters really spend just chasing feedback, pinging people 10,000 times. And I understand everyone is busy, but really, again, coming down to that partnership, if we're all working towards growing our team in a way that makes sense and will make us successful as a business. So we all need to be bought in here. So yes, SLAs for recruiters, but also same SLAs for interviewers and hiring managers.
I love that. We talk a lot about automation and those notifications. Here's a trick if you work in a larger company, perhaps ask your IT person to see how many hiring managers and who in the company has added the at ATS domain to their spam filter so they stop getting notifications. You'd be shocked.
That makes me very sad and angry at the same time. No.
Elena, we've done hypergrowth. The market has settled down a bit from the sprint we went through from post COVID. We saw a little bit of a slowdown, but yeah, I remember 2021, it was insane. What are you seeing right now in terms of the labor market for that speed you spoke to for both technical and go-to-market hiring, or G&A too, if you're doing any of those roles?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think now we're having a different kind of shift in the market. And I'm sure this is not new to anyone with AI now and the perception of AI, I should say. The expectation on hiring has changed, and everyone is after that 10x engineer or like that 10x add whatever role here. So it's creating an interesting dynamic again where we don't really know what a 10x employee truly is. We're saying words. But when it comes down to like profile and scoping the profile, we don't really know what that means. And so it feels like we found a cheat code to go directly into talking again to so many different candidates and skipping the kickoff and skipping like a time box calibration that helps us get on the same page. And it seems like everyone is going for the same talent, which if you've been in recruiting long enough, we've seen these cycles over and over again. It just creates this crazy competition for a few very specific roles, a few very specific, pools of people, of profiles. And then everyone else who could do an equally good job is just getting ignored. So I will always bring it back to what does the business need? What are the competencies? Let's just go and find them and tune out the noise that inevitably will happen in the market for one reason or another. So I think that's a big one that I've seen and I'm managing.
That's interesting you said that because we often talk about this like prestige bias in a more acceptable way called talent density, where it's, oh, we're building a payments platform. Let's go hire a bunch of folks that worked at Stripe. And it's, well, what was Stripe's hiring process? Did they just hire from the top 20 CS schools and like folks that went to Harvard Business School? Boom. It's just a proxy for prestige bias. So I think it's interesting when we look at that top of funnel precision. How do we map the market? How do we get better insight around people's skills? What I'm seeing right now with all this talent engineering is really just a faster development and signal on talent density and creating those like hit lists for sourcing, which we all have an Excel spreadsheet of like lookalike companies to source from. I think it's important to consider those folks that might bring an outside perspective, or maybe they have great candidate market fit with industry experience. That doesn't necessarily mean just go pummel somebody's inbox with a 5-stage drip campaign because they were working at a company on that hit list for 2 to 3 years and signaled some sort of upward mobility. What are your thoughts on talent density?
I understand talent density by what are you prioritizing for your company? If you're prioritizing top talent, sure, that's great. We should do it, sure. If it makes sense for the business to have only the top 10% across all of the teams, then we're going to do it. But that means that you need to look at your comp philosophy. Are you paying in that top percentile to be able to attract that top percentile candidate? Or are you in the top, 50%, but you're aiming for the top 90%? So it's like really making sure that it makes sense for your context and your business. And also, I don't know if talent density necessarily has to do with, let's say, the pedigree of it, which I hate that word so much, but just it's really, I think, defining what quality is to you. What does it mean? Does it mean that Maybe they execute super fast. Maybe they work very well autonomously. Maybe they just are very creative. Again, it depends on your business and what you're trying to achieve. And it's again one of those things that kind of just gets applied without being taken through the company personal filter, if you will. What does this actually mean for us? And how do we understand it as a company? What is the philosophy around it? But I think and this is why I'm pretty, I don't know, wary of all of these kind of hype words, even quality of hire, talent density, or whatever it is. For me, what's most important at the end of the day is that I build a great team that helps the business achieve its goals and grow, and we do what we set out to do successfully. And that is normally a North Star, and everything else comes from there. I think it's really easy to get distracted by all of these things that pop up every now and then on LinkedIn.
Totally. When I think about building great systems, you worked at some amazing companies. What do you build first when you go into an organization?
This is a very interesting question because recruiting always comes and talent always comes while things are in motion already. So it's the classic example of building the plane while flying it. But I would say the most obvious one would be to really clarify and tighten up the interview process, because most likely, most often than not, there are roles already open that the business needs. So that is like P0. It doesn't really matter what you want to build or why you were brought on board. Like those roles need to happen. So making sure that I take care of those. So looking at the process, looking at, are we closing candidates? We do have candidates in play later stage, depending on when you come in. Or is our top of funnel looking good? Is aligned? So really digging into that immediate kind of whatever is already in flight, making sure that is set up for success as much as possible. But that is like tinkering very subtly so that you don't necessarily disrupt everything as you come in, because then it creates some other interesting issues down the line with even candidates or scheduling. It could be as silly as that, but just being careful with the micro changes that you make. But yeah, definitely looking at the interview process, because hiring is always going to be a need. Most likely than not is going to be urgent whenever roles come up. So that needs to really flow seamlessly. Yeah, that's really my number one priority. Then we talked about, how do we plan our roles? Do we have a headcount planning process? How do we think about growing the team? What's the speed or velocity that we need to go at to deliver on our goals? Do we have clarity on that? So it becomes more of I look at the broader talent context in the business. And from there, I go from there because it's so different from company to company. But yeah, I would say just nailing down that process, that interview, that whole hiring piece, everything that we talked about from top of funnel to close rates and probably even beyond if we have capacity, just making sure that flows, and then look at, okay, what are actually our priorities for next once we stop the fires.
And there's always fires.
Yeah, there's always fires.
I think that's because a lot of early stage companies underestimate how much of recruiting is actually systems design. What are some of the mistakes founders make when they first think about recruiting and building that hiring engine?
Oof, that's a fun one because the founding recruiter is so hot right now. I would
So hot
say,
and misunderstood and misdefined. Like, how much founding are you doing if you're an order taker?
exactly. I think that's really the biggest mistake is they think they need someone. You probably saw the phrase to own recruiting. What does that mean? What kind of recruiting are you owning? Because like most likely you're coming into something that the founder has been running or founders have been running on their own. There's no recruiting function. You need to build that. What are you actually owning? And with the ownership piece comes a question of, how much autonomy do I have and how much decision-making power do I have to design the interview that I think would make the most sense? Are you, as the founder, going to have very strong opinions about what needs to be done? And it's going to be a directive, like, come in and I'm going to tell you what to do? Or am I looking to you as the founding recruiter to help me understand what are some best practices and build this engine together? So I think it really depends on kind of the level of openness and maybe readiness that the founding or founders have to basically welcome this recruiter function in. Yeah, it's a bigger conversation, I think.
100%. There was a post last week. I can't remember. I saw it, and it was actually a chart that quantified title inflation, where we have head of is now proxy for director just because it's like a rebrand and it sounds like better. Director, or what a director level implies, being a manager of a people manager. And then we have like
Mhm.
lead, where a lot of IC roles get lead on the title. And it's like you're the only person doing the job. And I think part of great signaling is just being pragmatic and setting expectations with folks. There was a great post by somebody that I saw too that was like, I'm looking for a B2B marketer with 3 years of experience, and everybody's apparently a CMO, a head of marketing, a VP of growth, or a founding marketer. And it's just own the job title. I think like there is nobility in being data analyst 2 or software
Yeah.
engineer 3 or
Yes. Yeah.
senior manager of. But I think startups always try to make things cute, and things are getting real cute right now with this talent engineer thing. We were also talking about the forward deployed recruiter. So we see a lot of stuff. Forward deployed recruiter seems like a little bit of the glow up of full stack recruiter. So it's just a naming
Mhm.
convention. What are your thoughts around some of the creativity? We have talked a lot about words, and you're a fantastic writer. What is the value of being intentional with our word?
As we've seen, words can influence even power dynamics, have quite a bit of, I guess, weight to understand why these different titles come to be. Of course, we want to keep it interesting. We want to maybe look like we are leading, we're very innovative and like we're coming up with these new creative ways of doing recruiting. Or but I don't know, like to your point, if the core of the role actually changes that much, or the skill set, or what's actually important, which we've talked about so far. I think that to me, I would still index on finding the person that makes sense for my team, for my company, versus getting distracted by the flashy new title or however we want to call the role. Even founding recruiter is just, what does that mean? It means you're the first one in, right? But what are you actually founding? You might just be executing on a process that is broken and you have no authority to change it, right? That doesn't really give you that quality of being a founding anything, because you don't have that space. So it's not only about you and what you can do, but like the role and the environment that you're joining. So I'm fine with the titles. I think they're funny sometimes. Like it's also pretty cyclical if you look back. The forward deployed engineer has been, a few years ago. Now it's made a comeback. It means slightly different things, but the same. I don't know. I find it funny. But again, call it what you will. If you give it the autonomy and the authority to do their best work, call it whatever you want. But just let them do their work. Let them cook.
Let them cook. And I think that's what the best hires care about too. They don't care what you call them as long as it's a great company, a great product. They have autonomy and agency. They're building something. Like great builders, like they don't care what the job title is. If you want a
And
title,
they
go to
get
Fang.
exactly. And they get recognized for the work, because I think that's also part of it. And like I typically get a lot of recognition. So that's one of the pieces that I'm a big fan of, to really recognize that, hey, we are the foundation of pretty much everything that we build here. And we need like a pat on the back every now and then.
I've really enjoyed how much we've talked about the power of words. You're a wonderful writer. Tell us about your newsletter.
Yes, thank you. So my newsletter is called Hiring at the Speed of Talent. I'm on Substack. The reason I started was because I wanted to provide a resource specifically for hiring managers. And it ended up being also obviously for founding recruiters and recruiters in general. But I do have a lot of empathy for hiring managers because, as I've said in the beginning, they're put in this position without much support or even experience. And it's really easy to fall into the me versus them kind of approach when it comes to hiring, like hiring manager versus recruiter. And my goal is to really show them all of the work that goes into recruiting, so then they can also build that empathy and understand like the partnership is really the best way to move forward, and for them to build their teams, and that they actually do have a partner in recruiting. That's what I'm doing with my newsletter. It's been an interesting journey, and I've got some really great feedback from people who are like, oh, okay, great. And even from recruiters to say, hey, this is how you do this, and not having to like build that trust maybe from the beginning, or like from zero. It's more of, hey, this is how things are done in recruiting. We don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. So that's my aim with my newsletter, is to really bridge that gap and get people to work together and focus on building great teams together.
Love that. And you're currently building great teams at Rundoo and hiring. What types of roles are you hiring for right now?
Yeah, we're hiring across the board, mainly in our go-to-market team in Chicago. We're hiring a bunch of AEs, BDRs for our support team as well. Of course, we're hiring on engineering in Redwood City, and it's a very fun space. I've really been enjoying it so much. We're helping small businesses in the hardware space. So it's really a breath of fresh air in all of the AI speak to actually get to work with small business owners and help them improve their business with like our product. So we are an AI native, of course, software tool for supply stores. Yeah, think anything from like POS to ERP. We help small businesses with figuring out their backend so they can be more effective in their day to day.
Love that. Why should somebody join Rundoo?
As I said, you get to like actually see the people that you work with, and you get to say that, hey, this is one of our clients. Driving down a 101 and seeing like a paint store or hardware store that is using Rundoo is like the best feeling every time I go into the office. But it's also like a real life application of your product or product and your company, and we can see like how it truly improves people's lives. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. So that's really what brought me to Rundoo, and I'm really hoping I can find some more people who think about that and care about the small business owners and will join our team.
Amazing. Any last words of advice for recruiters out there who may look to you as a leader and want to build a career like yours?
I would say trust in your expertise and experience and what you bring to the table, because it is very important. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. And I'm definitely talking about hiring managers who think they manage recruiters.
Heck yeah. That's the confidence we need. Elena, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.